What's up, niche site enthusiasts or just SEO bloggers in general? The interview you're about to see right here on YouTube is with Mike Donovan. I found him on Twitter. He runs his own niche site. In little over 2 years, he's like 500,000 page views a month, $20,000 in revenue a month. It's insanely impressive. So of course, I had to ask him about it. Now, this is a long podcast interview, but I will leave links in the description below this video. If you would like to jump around a little bit, I'll leave you one or two there. We talk about coming up with niche site ideas, keyword and competitor research, and what that means in 2022 and beyond, how to produce content for niche sites and SEO, current Google strategies, and quite frankly, a lot more. So it's casual, it's long. Sit back with a cup of Joe and enjoy this lovely chat with the one, the only, Mike D. Also, nichetwins.com. I'll also leave a link to that in the description below. That's where you can go find Mike. And I also recommend following him on Twitter because he provides a lot of value there. Okay, now without further ado, grab your cup of Joe and enjoy this chat with Mike Donovan. Mike, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Pete. Happy Cinco de Mayo.
Oh my gosh. It is, isn't it?
It is. Margarita night.
This is what happens when you work at home alone all day and never ever look at your calendar and you have no idea.
The days blend.
Yes, correct. I was not expecting that. You caught me off guard.
I threw your curveball.
Now I got to make plans to do like Mexican food tonight. Okay, Mexican food and margaritas aside. Actually, I'm never aside from Mexican food and margaritas. But for our purposes here today, Mike, Mexican food aside, I want to brag on you first, and then I'll let you talk on this podcast. I found you on Twitter. You're very active there. And I've been more and more into niche sites the past 9 months. I mean, I've been blogging for 12 years. At this point, I've done some of these in the past, but getting back into it last October and November as I start my own side projects, again, after taking 5 years off. And you have been one of the people I found over the last couple of months that I read almost everything you put out. And so I don't have all the stats in front of me, but I know that I think in April, which was last month, you hit your first $20,000 month, and you were hitting 500,000-ish page views a month, and just nice growth. So I didn't want to ask you about your exact numbers right up front, but to brag on you a little bit, I can say it seems like Mike is legit. So there you go.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that. It's crazy because it wasn't obviously an overnight thing, right? But it has gone in the last probably 6 months. It's just gone. It's gone absolutely exponential in a lot of ways. But yeah, it's kind of crazy to think it's at those numbers. Yeah, so it's above 500,000 page views and just broke 20,000 in a single month earnings in April. So yeah, really exciting.
Well, let's come back to the last 6 months. I actually want to start before that. So, Mike, if you could walk us through. I don't need to learn about how you kind of got into this whole online world mess, but I would like to hear how you started and when you started your first quote unquote niche site, content site, blog. A lot of people don't make the distinction. I personally do. Tell me when that was, and then I also want you to just walk me through the story of the first 6 months.
Yeah, really I think that's a great question because that's probably where I almost gave up a couple times. So I started in January of 2020 was the first time. So I think my story is probably unlike other people. This is the first and only site that I've ever started. And so it took off in a way that I don't think everyone has that experience. And so I think there was some luck that we can talk about some things that I did right that I didn't know I was doing right. But if I had looked at it going back, I might have changed some things like competition, for example. Yeah. But January 2020 was the first time that I got into it. I had watched, Income School guys incessantly before that. So I probably put in 40 to 60 hours of just watching their content on YouTube before I started. And just getting an understanding of what was possible. But your point about the language is important because my impression of what a blog was just so wrong. I didn't have, we say, I'm hearing more and more niche sites and content sites, but in my mind, blogging was like what you do after you had dinner with friends and you write about your day. You know what I mean? Yeah. I never thought about blogging as a money-making machine, which is how I interpret it now, given the experience that I've had and some of stuff I learned beforehand. But so I got started in January 2020, and then, I just made a commitment to post. The first month, I think I put up 6 articles. and it was painful. Like actually the first year was pretty painful for me, to be honest, in terms of writing. Like I hadn't written since college at scale. It was incredibly like after a day of work, sitting down in front of a computer and trying to get out a post about, you know, the topic I write about, I'm interested in, but I'm not like, it's not something that excites me to sit down and write about. So it was it was kind of a challenge really to sit down and pump out these articles, but I have the actual growth of the posts. So I started with 7. I went to 17, 20, 23, 24. I ended the year with 36 total posts, which is very little. When I talk to people and I look at what they commit to in a year and what I'm doing now, frankly, that's like nothing to put on the site. So it was 36 total posts at the end of 2020, heading into 2021.
Okay, pause. Can I ask you a few questions there?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. I totally get that. You haven't written since college, and now blogging is essentially just like putting words on a page and making it sound good. And then there's whole like user intent and good, quote in air quotes, good content. I want to ask you, if you don't mind sharing, what do you think the hardest part of that was? Or you said it was painful. What about it was painful? And more specifically, when did you overcome that? Like, was it just getting your reps in? Was there anything specific that you changed or looked at differently that helped it be less painful? You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's an important question. I don't know if I have the best answer. I think the thing that was, for me, the hardest part is I didn't have any proven record that I was even writing on the right topics, right? So mentally, I'm putting in all this time. I have no idea. I'm in the dark, right? I have no idea if all these hours that I'm putting out and it turns out the first 5 or 10 posts I wrote are garbage. They don't rank. The ones that do, I get like 3 people a month that come to those. I wasn't doing it right, but through those reps, I learned how to do it better. But I think that is the hardest part mentally for me. I've heard other people explain that too. No matter how many times I heard the income school guys say like, hey, get prepared to write to the abyss for 1 year. Like have the expectation that no one's going to find you. You're not going to make any money. And even knowing that going into it, it is so difficult at times. When in the first month, you're jazzed, right? I'm doing a new thing. I'm writing. I'm committed to doing this. Month 2, you're like, this is a lot of work. This is more than maybe I expected. Writing's kind of painful for me, at least personally. Yeah. And then month 3, 4, 5, once you start going through all of this and you're not supposed to be seeing anything yet, but you aren't seeing anything and writing's still painful. That is the hardest barrier, I think, for a lot of people. And certainly for me was just mentally sticking with it. But I think what gave me, once you start to get a little bit of traffic, that's not just you when your IP, like pinging it, like checking to make sure everything looks right. Yeah. But once you start to see like that map on Google Analytics light up a couple times and you see some people around the world hitting your site, that motivated me. And then of course my first dollar. So my first dollar I made month 6. So I made $4.34 with Amazon Associates 6 months into the project. So that kind of got me going a little bit. That's nothing, but it proved that, hey, I'm writing content online. I just made an affiliate commission on a couple products because they're really low. They were low paying products that I got payout on. But that sort of got me into it and got me motivated to push it even further. But yeah, it's the uncertainty of like, am I doing it right? Is this ever going to work? And it's a ton of work. It's a lot of hours, especially if you're working a 9 to 5. I have a wife. I have a kid now. I have friends. I have a life I want to have. And so, better than most people, it's like that part is painful when you don't know if it's going to work.
All right. So you've seen the movie Memento where they're like,
I actually haven't.
Oh, dude. Okay. You got to watch the movie. Doesn't matter. The point is, I want to skip around now. Maybe we can come back to the linear progression of your niche site. But I want to talk about 2 topics. First, let me actually just rant. Mike, I'm sorry. Give me a second, then I'll let you talk again. Promise.
Yeah.
It's my podcast. I get to rant.
Yeah. That's your right.
I was telling my wife, actually, just this week, in my own professional opinion, non-expert opinion, 3 things keep people from niche site success, quote unquote, very broad things. Number 1 would be lack of persistence. It's really easy to give up in month 6 when you're like, damn, it's dadgum thing come of this, and I don't even know if I'm creating the right content or targeting the right keywords, the right pillar or whatever. That's number 1. One of the other ones is niche selection, and that's what I'm going to talk about right now. So, Mike, maybe you don't consider yourself a pro or an expert, but right now you are way more knowledgeable than you were in January 2020 when you started. So I'm gonna ask both Mikes the same question, and I want both of you, the Mike January 2021, and then the Mike whatever year we're in now, 2020. David, I got my time mixed up. Doesn't matter. The point is, how did you think about choosing a niche then? Obviously, it turned out okay, but I want to know your thought process on how you chose your niche. You don't have to tell me what it is. And then the second Mike, present day Mike, I want to hear how you would have done it differently, or let's pretend I made you start another niche site this week. How would you go about that process? I know that's a long setup, but
no, it's a great question though, because I think that is persistence is number one. I completely agree. But then, making sure you're writing about the right topic. So when I chose the topic that I write about now, the niche that I'm in, it was something that in that moment I was actually actively doing. I was interested in, and I cared about it. I still care about it. I'll share that I'm in the tech space. I'm fine sharing that broadly, that's the niche high level that I'm in. I've shared that openly online a couple times before. And actually my 9 to 5, I work in technology as well. It's not related to my job per se, but so I'm interested in it. So I knew that I could, the thing I did right was I knew I could write about it. Sometimes it's boring, as with all things. And sometimes I'm excited to write about it, but I knew I could stick with it, and I was knowledgeable. So I had a foundation. It wasn't like I was completely, green to the space and had to do a bunch of work just to get my bearings. I had my bearings to start. So that was the right thing. The other thing I got lucky with, this was not something that I did consciously, is that my domain is pretty open-ended. I should say it's broad enough that I can grow. I'm 2.5 years into this. I can grow the site for another 3 years. I'm confident in terms of the keywords and the space that this is in. And I'm ranking for things as I start to branch out a little bit. I'm starting to rank for other topics within my space, and I can just keep growing. I'm seeing that happening. I didn't narrow myself into example I gave online is about playing tennis. I wouldn't want to write about left-handed tennisracketplayers.com. You know what I mean? After how many articles can you put out there, right? You're going to exhaust that space. And, what's the traffic look like for a topic like that? So I did get lucky with the domain, because I do think that helps me sort of in the space that I'm in grow into it. Yeah. And so those are the big ones is making sure you can sit down and write about it, especially your first one. If you're like now I'm making money with this site, I could totally see myself writing about something maybe I'm a little less interested or knowledgeable in, knowing that it works in the business side of it and the results I can get. But your first one, you have no idea if it's going to work. So make sure it's something that you're interested in, so you can sit your butt in a chair for many, many hours.
Yeah. Well, okay. I always try and put myself in the position of my audience, obviously. And I can imagine that if you task somebody with writing down a few niche site data, let's say let's just say me. I already have one. But I'll say I want to start another niche site. I got a list of 5 to 10 topics that I think might be okay. They're not super broad, like parenting, and they're not left-hand-tennis-rackets.com or whatever. What now? How would you validate that niche? Where would you go? Would you go in Ahrefs? Would you go in Google? How would you take these 4 or 5 ideas and then narrow it down to which one's going to be viable? How do you think about that process?
Yeah, so that's the very first thing I would do is start doing. So Ahrefs is a good tool. SEMrush is fine. These keyword tools, they're tools, right? They provide data points. Do not take them at face value. Their numbers are all wrong, but they give you a data point, right? And what you're trying to do is just get enough data points to say this thing could work. So the first thing I would do is for each niche, before I committed to doing any of them, I would say, all right, if I'm going to write about this, what are some ideas? What are some topics? What are some keywords within that particular niche that I would write about day one? And just start looking for them, right? So if it's tennis, or if you're talking about, a rackets.com, I would just start typing in, how to serve, how to do an overhand serve. Just start typing in all these different ideas. Google will do the autocomplete. It'll give you some other ideas of things to look at. Take some of those keywords, plug them in to the keyword research tools. And the best thing you can do is look for volume keywords that are getting some volume that the tools are telling you. It'll be wrong, but it'll tell you it's getting something. And then look on the top page for that keyword, right? So page number 1, do you see other sites that are DR 35 or lower on that page for those keywords? So come up with a list of 30 even if you have to, because you don't want to pick a niche and then go down, work on it for 3 months and have to redo the whole process because you found out actually it's not what you thought it was. So it'll be a little bit of work up front. But I think that's the number one telltale for me, is if you can come up with a pretty easy list of keywords that you would write for that niche, and you're seeing some low DR sites already ranking for those keywords on page 1, to me, that's like a go sign, right? You have keywords that you could find pretty easily. They show some volume, and there's other sites already ranking for those that aren't the number 1, 2, 3 dogs in that space that rank for all these keywords. So that's what I would do today, just to confirm that, hey, this is something I can write about for a long time. There's keywords, there's volume, and the competition is such that sites that aren't crushing it are ranking for those on page 1.
Yeah. And by DR, just for the direct newbies among us, domain rating, this is actually Ahrefs. Ahrefs. You know what? I had Tim Solo, the marketing dude at Ahrefs, come on my podcast, and he told me it was Ahrefs. But
Ahrefs?
He has a very thick, Ukrainian accent. I can't remember where he's from, but I still don't know. It's Ahrefs or Ahrefs? I don't know. Doesn't matter. The point is that's like their own proprietary metric for like how powerful a site is, essentially. There are some other things that they say are behind it. You can also, I'd forgotten until literally today, that Moz has a nice free tool. It's not DR. They think of it as, I think it might be DA, domain authority. I can't remember, but it's completely free. And so you can actually plug these URLs you see from Google search results, page 1, into the Moz tool. You can just Google Moz domain check. It'll pop right up. Totally free. It'll give you some nice information there, as well as some of their top posts, by the way, and their page authorities. It's kind of a handy tool. Anyways, one more question on this topic, and then I can move on, Mike. What about monetization? Actually, this is one of the most pressing questions I have for you. And the question is, okay, I got a couple of niches that I'm interested in that I think could do well. I've got like 30 keywords across, let's say, like 10 different categories. One would be on rackets and tennis racket reviews. Another one might be on like general tips and tutorials or how-to, or like specific questions or these sorts of things. Ads and affiliate marketing. So let me give you a little bit more context. Something I wish I had done different, even 7 months ago. I started my niche site 7 months back, and I was primarily focused on affiliate content. And actually, the Authority Hacker guys, they talk about this all the time. There's 2 different types of content in a lot of ways. What I am good at are like 4,500, 5,000 words with just lots of different blocks of formatting and colors, and it's like pristine and precise and custom photography and like those sorts of mega posts. Like how to start a blog. I used to be on like page 1 for that. I haven't done that in like 4 years, but like those sorts of posts, right?
That's I think you're on page 2 though. I checked. You're on page 2 and you're at the top of it, I think, for that. I could be wrong.
I don't even know because I haven't blogged in 2.5 years. But, well, that's not true. I released 2 posts in the past month, but before that, 2.5 years. Doesn't matter. That's what I have experience with. And so coming into the niche site, I was like, cool, maybe nothing has changed. Well, it turns out that I've seen a lot of other people actually write for ads. And so I want to ask you, what does that mean? What does that mean? Just give me your overall thoughts. I thought I had a specific question here, but I don't.
No, I think you do. I mean, the premise the way I look at it now, and I'm new to this. I'm not an expert. I'm always learning. But when I came into this, I thought I'd be making my money from affiliates. And if I were to start a site today, my primary focus would be display ad monetization. I would start there. And what that means is you're going after informational posts. Mm-hmm. So you're not going after, to start, you're not going after these, buyer intent type topics or these product roundups or reviews. You're going after the questions. And in my experience, when you do that, those are lower competition because historically everyone's going after the buyer intent topics. Naturally, those words are going to be harder to rank for. But if instead of going for best tennis racket, right, you go for how to do an overhead serve, that might be competitive, but you get the idea, and start going through all of these questions that maybe, and you can work your way closer and closer to when someone might buy in that progression. But if you just start going after those informational posts, one, they have a ton of traffic. A lot of these have more traffic than people would believe in terms of just question and answer posts. And two, the competition is a little bit less. So you're going to find success earlier, and you're going to get a ton of traffic. Yeah. Historically, unless you're in finance or some of these other, gambling, some of these spaces that pay just ridiculous RPMs, and my advice is stay far away.
VPNs.
Yeah, you stay far away from all of those because you're never going to compete unless you have a huge pocket, a huge purse to pay for backlinks and stuff. But if you're in one of these less competitive spaces, go after informational posts, get the traffic, and then turn on display ads. Display ads are going to pay you per 1,000 visitors that come, and how, there's a lot that goes into what you get paid in the end. But basically, if they come to your page, they see the ad, you're making money every time that they come. So it's sort of a numbers game. You want something that pays decent RPMs, which is how much you get paid per 1,000 visitors, and you want traffic. And the combination of those two things. So yeah, I would start there. And actually, you can grow that. So if you start there, get traffic, go after lower competition things that have high volume, you can branch into affiliate stuff down the road if you're really into that, right? But I think your success is greater if you start from a place of let's go after the lower competition stuff, and you can make a ton of money from display ads as well.
Yeah. You actually shared on Twitter. I saw this like just a couple of hours ago. I actually just pulled it up while you were talking. I have no idea who this person is. Jared Bowman.
So he took over Niche Pursuits podcast from Spencer.
Oh, really? Mm-hmm. I didn't know that. Okay. Well, you retweeted his post, and his post is, should you target these high search volume or low search volume keywords? And it's interesting. He shared his top 10 posts from the past month and like what the SEO tools said about it, as in like keyword volume and that sort of stuff. And it was interesting. Question posts are rounded out like 5 of his top 10, right? Which was overwhelmingly the most traffic from question posts. And most of those have keyword volumes, quote unquote. This is another testament to the numbers are actually factual, right? Like these tools, they're pretty broad. Have like no search volume for some of these. His first one is like keyword search volume 10 a month. How many page views did he get? 4,000. The next post was like keyword search volume 1,200 searches a month. How many page views did he get? 3,700. And part of the reason is Google gets better and better, as we all know. You rank for hundreds and hundreds of keywords. Like that's there's lots of long tail stuff in there. It wasn't like this 10 years ago, by the way. It's really interesting. But I've been obsessed with this after reading you on Twitter and a few other people for the past couple of weeks. By the way, I have 25 posts live on my niche site because I started off really slow. And almost all of those are like roundup reviews and product reviews and like best of and yada, yada. So I'm hitting this from a beginner perspective for sure.
And I'm totally biased, so I take that with a grain of salt. You might crush it on those 30 posts, you know what I mean? But that's been, and actually I like that you brought up that tweet from Jared, because I think it reiterates a few things. One is, like we talked about at the top, it's a data point. Keyword research tools are a data point. In my experience, they almost always underestimate the amount of traffic. But what's nice about that is if it says 1,000 for volume, that's a pretty good thing to go after. But what Jared was doing in that, going after the 10 or the 20 volume keywords, he knows that these tools sometimes drastically underestimate because of what you said. There's a million variations of a search that could lead to that keyword or to your page. Yep. And they do a poor job of rounding that up. But what I like about what Jared's approach is, that means there's less competition in the long run too. Because most people are going to ignore those in the keyword research tool.
Yes.
They're going to not look at those 10s, 20s, 30s. Whereas if you go after some of those, and believe me, you'll go after some of those and they'll be duds. They will confirm the fact that they have low volume. That's happened to me many times. But you'll get a couple home runs, and in the long run, you'll probably stay at the top of the list because fewer, people aren't going to be going after those. Like they go, like the ones I look for 1,000. My space is there's a lot of volume. There's a lot of keywords. So I look for sort of 1,000 as my benchmark. And some of them will be a little under that. And some of them are 15,000 a month. And it says, 1,200 or 1,500. But you can pick sort of a benchmark of what you are comfortable with. But I would say rule of thumb is they underestimate more times than not.
There's actually a tool recommendation I'll throw out there. I can't remember the name of it now. Low hanging fruits.
Yeah, I've heard about this enough. I got to check it out.
I'm pretty sure it's Low Fruits. Lowfruits.io. It's actually pretty cool. I tried it out for the first time about a week ago, and I just liked the way it worked. So everybody should go check that out. I didn't pay money for it. Maybe there's a paid plan. I'm sure there is. I just used the free version. I like the way it works. Lowfruits.io.
I'm going to try that.
Do I want to? Yes, I do. I'm sorry. I feel like I'm a noob when it comes to what we're talking about right now. So I'm going to continue.
Well, you got a noob here. 2.5 years doing something is not making anyone an expert. So, so go for it.
Well, I like hearing part of the reason I'm smart is because I talk to a lot of people for the podcast and otherwise. Just I want to hear what you're doing, right? And then I want to compare that to Spencer's actually going to come on my podcast again. I had my friend Rich on a couple of months ago, and I'm looking to do like 4 or 5 more interviews. I'm going to take everything all of you say and like smush it together.
It's also that you're also in the process too, right? So you can actually take some of this and maybe try something or do something slightly differently or whatever, right?
Totally. Actually, I don't know if you've looked, but I haven't really done this podcast in like 2 years. I've done interviews and I've released episodes every now and then, but it hasn't been like my full focus for over 2 years now. I was telling somebody yesterday, it's like, I'm bringing my podcast back. And they're like, why exactly? Like, I don't do sponsors. It's not worth the headache. The money's not worth the headache. It's like, I do YouTube, but also have so many other side projects. That's where I make most of my money. Like, why you do this? And I told them, honestly, so I can like learn.
Seems reason good enough for me.
Yeah.
If you could get people on, pick their brain on what's working for them and take bits and pieces of it, that's worth it.
Yeah. For free.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. All right, Mike. So walk me through these question posts in terms of, I hate to use the word counts, just because I think people put way too much emphasis on this, but not word counts. I want to hear about the structure of your writing now. And I can only guarantee, or I can only assume that since writing has become slightly less painful for you since 2021, that you probably have some methodologies or frameworks or templates or how you approach this. Tell me about that. I want to hear what you're doing right now. Like for the next 4 weeks, I'm sure you're going to be producing content. How have you thought about this? And when you sit down to write, what do you do? What do you open up first? How do you go through this process?
Yeah, so a couple things around word count. I think you're right that it gets brought up. New people to blogging niche sites. That was my question always, was like, how many words should I write? And it depends, right? The unsatisfactory answer of it depends. But I did, just because I was curious, I have 250 posts up on my site. There's a plugin you can do for WordPress that will tell you exactly how many words those articles are. I'm averaging 1,400 words a post. Now, that doesn't tell you anything in particular, right? Because some of those posts might have needed to be 2,500 words because the posts that were ranking were 3,000 or in that ballpark, and I had to do the topic just lend itself to more words to cover it. But the answer is you should write a piece of content that adequately covers the searcher's intent and even maybe goes a little beyond without straying too far. Because if you stray too far off the topic, actually Google's come out with, they don't actually even count those words. Like it's as if those words don't even count. So if you wrote 5,000 words, but only 3,000 of them cover the topic, you're really only getting ranked on those 3,000. The other 2,000 are kind of junk and throwaway. So you want to keep it reasonable. But so it's 1,400 words that I write. It's actually funny because as you were talking about what you're really good at, I'm terrible at. I'm not great at like the 5,000 behemoth, really nice, beautiful posts. I don't do that great. But what I do really well is look at these questions, and I just start with, I'll come up with a keyword. So for example, I love using the cars because there's a lot of comparisons to my space that I can do without giving it away. But so say it's like your Toyota won't start, right? You have a Toyota, it won't start. The keyword is Toyota won't start. And that gets, 10,000 people a month type that into Google. The first thing I'll do is jump over to YouTube. And I'll just watch 10 or 15 videos about people that have a Toyota that won't start. And they will tell you step by step the things that they're doing in order to fix that, right? And so you come up with, you can look at things like likes, you can look at comments. People will tell you pretty quickly if what that person is saying worked or not. They'll say, hey, number 2 worked for me, great. And so you can get a sense of like what's actually working, and you can come up with your structure of your post that way. I keep it super simple. When you go to a site and you read a post and it's 500 words of fluff before you get any value out of it, it just irritates the heck. I jump off those posts so quick. And so most people are like, well, we need to keep them on the page. The way I keep people on the page, 50 words right into the answer target. So it's called the featured snippet. I win a ton of those. So it's a 50-word intro of just like, hey, I know it stinks when your Toyota car won't start. I own a Toyota, like whatever's real. I'm not making stuff up, but just explaining like, hey, I know your problem. And by the way, boom, here's a 50-word, because Google eats up 50 words answer targets. They love that for whatever reason. In bold, here's your answer. Yep. Now, that answer almost always needs further explanation. You're never going to be able to sufficiently answer most of these questions in 50 words. But I think that tells the reader, this person is straight to business and they know what they're talking about. They gave me value quickly. Now let me read the further explanation of each of these steps that they're recommending. And then it's just from there, it's literally every header is like the fix, like whatever the thing is, right? So maybe it's, you got to change your oil. I'm terrible with cars, so I wouldn't actually know. But like, you got to change your oil. You have to do this. And those are all my headers. And then I'm just filling in content. But I'll start with the research, get really well, familiar myself with the problem and what the solution is. And then I'll format my H2s, H3s based on what I think is, and I'll do it in logical order based on what I think is the most likely fix to work based on what I'm seeing out there. And then I fill in words for those sections. And then I always have a conclusion. And the conclusion bullet point summarizes exactly what I talked about in the post. And what that does is it gives you a second opportunity to win the featured snippet. I win a lot of these. And the first one is typically the right at the top, the bolded 50-word part. But if you write a nice, concise conclusion that summarizes in bullet format, it gives Google another opportunity to grab that. Because sometimes they like the bulleted list for things, and other times they like just the text. And it's really hard to tell which one they're going to prefer. But if you do that consistently on all your posts, you have double the odds of winning that featured snippet. And so that's basically it. It's pretty simple. But I think the thing that I can't stress enough is do not look at the top 5 articles and just regurgitate it. You will not win. Those are already there. They've been there for a while. They've already covered what you're covering. You need something better. And the way I'm getting that is from YouTube. Because people, if you're willing to listen to a 25-minute video, you're going to get some great tidbits that these other people are just copying each other. And so it's just like, it's like this gross, they're all just regurgitating the same words, basically. And so if you do something a little bit different and you actually come up with it, and then look at it right before you hit post, make sure you're not missing anything that's pretty, that maybe they covered, that's great. But otherwise, I try to be unique and go to YouTube for a lot of my research.
I'll underscore part of that for folks listening. I personally believe for anybody who finds it painful to write, whether that's creating content that takes too much time, just literally drains me of creative energy to write a blog post, or all these people. We all feel this from time to time. For those people, outlining and research is your superpower, in my opinion.
Agreed.
I do look at YouTube stuff for my niche, and for mine, I think actually opening up the top 10 in Google is actually more valuable, just because it's not as competitive, and it's not just regurgitated content. I found a lot of stuff in here. That's just my niche, though. Writing is so much easier when you have like a detailed outline that you have already researched. For some people, maybe that's 20 minutes. Some people, maybe it's like 3 or 4 hours. But the actual creation of content goes like so fast when I have that. And I think makes the content that much better. So outlining, research.
I think that's great.
Yeah. Screw the blank page, man. Right?
Yeah, well, that is what's daunting. That's actually a great tip, and I do that a lot of times because I struggle. I'll be tired at night, and I tweeted something similar to along these lines where it's like, if I'm beat at the end of the day and I know I'm not going to actually get a post out, instead of just not doing anything, I'll do the research and get the H2s in. And then when I wake up early the next morning, I have it there, and it just gets easier, right? You've done something, you've moved the needle, and for me now, the writing part is actually the quickest part. It's doing adequate research so that I'm actually answering the thing. I think one thing that gets missed, like I still see this get missed, and everyone's trying to scale quickly. They're trying to use AI to sort of shortcut things. What is missed still is just write content that you would be happy to find, right? If you typed in that search into Google, be honest with yourself. When you look at your piece of content, would you be like, boom, got it?
No.
It is answering my question. It's well researched. It's written clearly. It's not, and if you do that really well, you'll kill it. Most people know that, and they're like, okay, but what's the next thing? And they don't really think like, I got to write good content. This isn't just like how do I game the system? How do I get to the right quality content that you'd be happy finding? And most times you can make some mistakes in some of these other on-page SEO areas, and you can still rank because you'll send some metrics to Google if people find you that, hey, they're on the page for a long time, they're not going somewhere else. You'll send some strong signals that you're good. But that people love skipping over that. I know that. What's next? But it's like, focus on that. Really think about that.
Yeah. Yeah. Scratching your own itch. You hear this in entrepreneurship and startup world a lot, right? Like, solve your own problems. And part of that, I'll give you a great example. I completely agree with you, by the way. I suck at reading. I've just always been terrible at it. Part of it's like my attention span, a little bit of like ADD or ADHD thrown into my brain, and just for whatever reason, I just can't read. I cannot tell you the last time I read a blog post all the way through. It was before I started this business 5 years ago. That's for damn sure. I just don't read. I can't read. And part of that for me is long paragraphs with no bolded sentences, too many paragraphs between subheaders. I mean, the list goes on and on. We can talk about formatting like all day long, but I know for me personally, that is what my content is. It's content that even me, an idiot, can actually read and find the answers and skim appropriately. I think it's not that I'm the best in the world at that, but that's always been my content toolkit because I suck at reading so bad.
I first of all, I also haven't read it in a long time. I love podcasts. I love audiobooks, but I can't get myself to sit down and read. Same. But I think I don't think anyone could convince me that long bodies of text that don't have bolded areas or flow is better than shorter, snippier, be able to skim if you want to. Some people will read your stuff all the way through, but you want to be able to appease both crowds, right? Someone wants to read it all the way through, no problem, you still can. But if you want to skim it, if your post isn't skimmable, they're clicking off and going to the next one, right? And you don't want to lose that person, because even if time on page is low, that's a signal to Google, right? They're only on my page for 2 minutes, but they didn't go click another result in the SERP in the first page. That's a good signal to Google, right? So it balances itself out. But if you don't have something that's skimmable and they go to the next one down, you're going to just get knocked off in terms of the competition. And I think the trend is obviously towards shorter, conciser, snippier. And I don't mean short in terms of the full length of the article, but just make it digestible, and you'll make more money with ads. The more blocks of text you have, the less places you can put ads. Your RPMs will plummet if you do big paragraphs for 1,400 words. You only have 5 spots for an ad, basically, if you do that.
Also, everybody right-click and inspect your font size. If it's less than like 16 pixels, you're doing it wrong.
Great tip. It should be, I don't know what is yours now. Do you know, Pete?
Oh, Mike, you just opened up the can of worms. I am the nerd. Oh, I've changed it 3 times in the past week. So if you looked, there's no doubt. No, I'm the nerd that went through at some point. I still have a spreadsheet on this. I don't think I've shared it with anybody in a long time. I analyzed the top 20 sites for SEO in the online marketing niche. This is back when this was 4 or 5 years ago at this point. Like Brian Dean and the Backlinko and the Glenn Alsop and Detailed.com and all these people actually use Detailed to come up with this list. I opened up every single site and I looked at their font size, line height, and then the paragraph bottom margin. And I compared those things and I got an average. Like I literally got an average of like all these different sites. And for like 2 years, that's exactly what I did on Do Even Blog. It was like the average font size, line height, the paragraph bottom margin. That's how nerdy I am. I just wanted to share that.
It feels like a good case study to do again and throw out there, because I swear people when you're in the beginning, people don't care about that stuff, but once you start making some money, and that, like, a font size difference can be significant in terms of earnings, like in terms of what's visible on mobile, because most traffic these days is mobile. But yeah, you're right that font size actually, it can be a contributing factor to how much money you're making.
I don't know what I did. I don't know what I ended on last week, but I think I'm 18 at the moment.
I think I'm 18 or 19. Not again, for people that are new, don't worry about this stuff. I mean, seriously, work on content and hit publish.
Yes.
Don't worry about your font size, site speed. Don't worry about any of that crap. Content. Everything has to do with content in the beginning. And then once you start getting traffic, you can do what Pete and I are nerding out on and start to tweak some of this stuff. But none of it matters in the early days. It does not make an impact on your success. It's all about content at that point.
Yeah, totally. Well, let's see. This actually leads me to a point. I'll rant on this and I'll let Mike go. I know I got to let you go here. It's not just fonts, but we can do this all the time, right? We all get caught up in this. Oh, man, Dynalist or Workflowy? Not really sure which to use. Tell me your opinions. Or, Cloudways or Big Scoots or all this other hosting or page speed. Like, give me the caching plugins, all this stuff. And I used to be the person that I had to try them all. Right, I felt it was my job as a podcaster for Do Even Blog. Like, I got to learn all these tools and try them and give people recommendations. And the older I get and the lazier I get, the more I'm just like, stop thinking about all these things and just do this, right? And I followed that advice myself. Now I use Cloudways and I have my page speed stack, which is like Short Pixel for images, WP Rocket, Cloudflare. And and I use the same Elementor templates for all my sites. It's I don't think about this anymore, and I recommend everybody else do the same.
Keep it simple.
Yeah. Find somebody you trust.
If you don't mind, Pete, I want to just add 2 quick things.
Please do.
And you just reminded me of it. One is, when you're starting out, do some upfront learning so you don't make silly mistakes, like about picking your niche, making sure it's not too specific, about picking your domain so you don't back yourself in a corner that you don't have enough to write about after 6 months or a year. Make sure you set it up the right way, right? Like, own the domain. Don't do like a .wordpress site. I have a couple friends that started blogs on .wordpress. They don't even know, that's not going to rank well. You're going to have trouble. So do some basic foundational learning. You can get it for free on YouTube, podcasts like yours, other people, but make sure you do that piece. But then stop and start doing it, because a lot of people, I even got caught up in this, is I spent a year consuming content around how to build a site, and I never even did it until, I got motivated at a certain point to do it. I could have started way before, because the beginning, like I mentioned at the top, the first 10, 15 posts I wrote were all crap, and those took me many months to write. But if I had started that earlier, I could have got through that painful learning crap phase and onto I'm faster, I'm better, I know how to do this. So I would say don't overanalyze this stuff. It's not overly complicated, but until you do it, you won't really understand it. And then the other piece I wanted to say, and this won't be applicable to everybody, but it's around something that I've been calling brand swapping. If people have been in the space for a little bit, they know duplicate content. They get this idea in their head that they're somehow going to Google's going to take them off the internet if they have multiple site pages that are similar. But what I have found a ton of success with, and I won't go into the full thing because it's a little bit detailed, but I have pages on my site. I'll use the Toyota Won't Start example, where I am swapping out Toyota for Ford and Ford for Hyundai. So Toyota won't start, Ford won't start, and I'm using 80 to 90% word for word what I wrote in one post in this other post. And then the 20 to 10% difference, which might be specific to a certain brand, like maybe they have a different starter that you need to look at when the car won't start. There might be some nuance there, but it just so happens that when your car won't start, most of the fixes are the same for all cars. And I'm taking one post and I'm turning it into 15. And I'm getting number one spot. So in one particular cluster where I'm doing this, I'm getting 70, 80,000 of my page views out of the 500,000 just from that. And they're 80 to 90% the same. And I think people, if you have not everyone will have this opportunity to do it depending on what niche you're in.
Yep.
But if you have the opportunity, I'd say try it. The risk is very low. Google came out and said, if you get caught with duplicate content, they just don't index a page. They said outright, they will not penalize your site. So the worst thing that happens is your page doesn't get indexed, big whoop. Or you get the results I'm getting, which is both of them rank and you get the one spot and you're getting huge traffic, right? So that has worked insanely well for me.
You have a thread on this, don't you?
I have a very detailed thread that I wrote up using cars as an example that people can see. That's at Niche Down on Twitter.
Yep.
But I have to share it because it has made writing some months so much easier. Like when you know you're writing one post that you're going to turn into 10, my motivation goes through the roof. One, to make that post amazing because I'm going to replicate it. I want it to be great.
Yeah.
And then two, it's like I can scale myself, right? Like I can put out 20 to 25 posts a month pretty easily if 10 of them are basically 80 to 90% the same.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Walk me through how you do that, because I saw your thread and I've started doing this. Do you literally copy and paste the actual content and then go through and edit it for the new brand and stuff like this?
So my exact process is I take the first post I write, so say it's Ford won't start, I put it in a Google Doc. I do find replace Ford for Toyota.
Yep.
I then copy the whole thing, put it in a new post for Toyota won't start, and then I do research, right? And the research is important because you're going to find the 10 to 20% difference between Toyota and Ford that you need to include. Yep. Because if I have the Toyota, I want it to be Toyota specific. And if there's 10 or 20% difference, that's got to be in the post. So make sure you include it. So that's a little bit of work, is finding where those differences may lie. And then the other sections I'm not touching. I'm not changing the words. It's just the key, that brand name that I'm changing. So it is literally word for word, with the exception of Ford versus Toyota in that example, that are exactly the same.
That's so interesting.
And it's working really, really well.
I love that. Thanks for sharing, Mike. That's really great.
Yeah, happy to.
It's funny. You just reminded me of something I discovered a year or two ago, but I've been doing a lot of on YouTube. So I know that we're not talking about YouTube this go around, but one thing I like better about YouTube, and specifically YouTube search too. I'm not talking about recommended feeds and suggested videos and that stuff. That stuff's powerful too. But just for search, like the same brand can do like 5 videos and they'll all be on page 1. Like if you Google, if you Google too, I guarantee you'll see this. Go to Google or YouTube or both and search in like Sony A7S III review or something like that. You're going to see like the first 20 videos are like 5 channels. You'll see Sean and Think Media like all over there. And for my own niche, I have, I took a screenshot and I put it in my private community, Online Impact. I'm ranking I have like the top 3 videos for like several semi-related keywords. I'm just like dominating the top of like YouTube search. It's really interesting.
Yeah. And it works, and you might cannibalize some of your content, but you can kind of pick up on that and then you can adjust if you need to.
Yeah.
But I think it's totally worth doing. And when you start writing more and more content, you have this catalog of sections. Like I'll go back if I'm writing about something I've written about before, I'll just take a whole section, boom, copy, paste, throw it into there. So that maybe it's 10 or 20% word for word what's elsewhere. But I might not even change that section because I already wrote it great for another post. It makes sense for this post. I'm copying and pasting it over.
I do that a lot. I love it. Mike, tell me about nichetwins.com. I want to let you go. And I asked you off air, like, where can we send people who want to follow you? I will throw out twitter.com/nichedown or niche down, depending on how you like to say that. Twitter.com/nichedown. But you also brought up nichetwins.com. So what is that?
Yeah. So I have a group chat with my brothers. One of them is an identical twin, Keith. And I was sending them the progress when I was getting no traffic, right? I'd do like a monthly little review of like, little business, like quarterly reviews and stuff, like just to keep myself motivated, and they would be engaged with it. And then he started to see like the money that the site was starting to make. And so he got really motivated to try this. Yeah, exactly. So 6 months ago he did, and he's up to 30,000 page views on his site. So he's gunning for Mediavine. I think he's probably a month or 2 away based on his growth. He's on Twitter at Patient Publish. But we started nichetwins.com just as something to do together. We've always wanted to try to build something and work on something together. And so for now, it's just going to be where we share our monthly, earnings reports, traffic reports. some details on like what we're learning, what we're finding month by month, and how things are going. And then we're going to definitely expand on what we're sharing on Twitter. I was saying to you, Pete, beforehand, I love Twitter, but there's only so much you can communicate in that format. And a lot of times it leaves stuff to be desired. Like I want to go deeper and further on topics, and we're going to do that at nichetwins.com. So I'm excited about it. I appreciate you letting me give that a little shout out. I have no idea where it's going to go, but it's a fun project.
I love it. Mike, this has been amazing, my friend. Thank you so much for coming on.
Nice meeting you, Pete. Thank you.